My stepsister called me just a nurse at her wedding. Then the groom's father recognized me. My name is Danielle Okafor. I'm 31 years old. And for most of my life, I was the family's afterthought. The quiet one, the responsible one, the one who stayed in her lane and never made a fuss. That was fine. I learned to live with that. What I didn't learn to live with, what I refused to carry one more day after June 14th of last year, was being publicly diminished in front of 200 people by the same woman I had quietly, faithfully loved for 15 years. Here's where we begin: the reception hall. The Grandview Estate in Scottsdale, Arizona. 6:47 in the evening. The chandeliers were dripping with ivory wisteria and gold Edison bulbs, the kind of wedding decor that costs more than most people's cars, and everyone was glowing with that particular warmth that expensive wine and a perfect desert sunset will produce. My stepsister Courtney, the bride, the center of the universe, the girl whose name had always been written in the family ledger in bold, was standing at the sweetheart table, holding her champagne flute mid-toast. She was beautiful. She really was. White Vera Wang, cathedral veil, $30,000 smile. And then she pointed at me, seated at table 11, not the head table, not even close, and said loud enough for the microphone to catch it, "And my sister is here too. She's just a nurse, bless her heart, but we love her anyway." The laughter that followed was light, polite, the kind that doesn't know it's complicit. I felt my face go still. The way your face goes still when you've been here before, when your body already knows the architecture of this particular wound. I picked up my water glass. I did not cry. I did not leave. And I almost made it through the night without incident. Almost. Because 3 tables away, a man in a charcoal Brioni suit had gone very, very quiet. He was staring at me, not rudely, with recognition, like someone who had just seen a face they'd been looking for in a crowd for a long time. His name was Dr. Richard Thorne, and he was the groom's father. And what happened next changed everything about the rest of my life. Stay with me. Before we get into this, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And drop your location and your local time in the comments right now. I love knowing where in the world people are sitting when they hear something that hits close to home. Tell me where you are. Let me take you back to the summer of 2009. I was 8 years old. My mother, Adese Okafor, had been divorced from my biological father for 2 years, and she had recently started dating a man named Gary Whitfield. Stocky, loud, generous with his laugh, the kind of man who filled every room he walked into and somehow made it feel like a compliment. Gary had a daughter from his first marriage. Courtney was 9. She had strawberry blonde hair and Gary's laugh, and the very first time I met her, she was wearing a pink sundress with strawberries on the hem, and she offered me half her popsicle without being asked. I thought, this is my sister now. I really thought that. My mother and Gary were married the following April, in a small ceremony at a botanical garden in Tempe. I wore a yellow dress. Courtney was the junior bridesmaid. In the photographs, we are holding hands at the altar. I have looked at those photographs many times in the years since. I am always struck by how completely real the happiness on my face is. I wasn't performing. I was 8 years old, and I had a sister and a father figure, and a family that felt, for the first time in a long time, like something solid. But families can feel solid the way ice feels solid. You don't know it's thinning until you've already fallen through. Gary was not a cruel man. I want to be careful about that. He wasn't a monster. He was something more complicated, and in many ways more painful. He was a man who simply loved his biological daughter more than he loved me, and he never bothered to hide it or pretend otherwise, and everyone around him gradually accepted this as a natural law, the way you accept gravity. Courtney's school play got a standing ovation from both parents and all 4 grandparents. My school play. I was the lead. I had 17 lines. I had rehearsed in front of the bathroom mirror for 6 weeks. My mother came, alone. Gary had a work thing. This happened when I was 9. Courtney's 11th birthday was a pool party at a rented venue with a DJ and a custom cake shaped like a horse, because Courtney loved horses. My 11th birthday was a Friday night dinner at Applebee's with my mom and Gary and Courtney, who spent most of the meal on her phone. Gary handed me a card with $60 in it. The card said, "Happy birthday, kiddo." Not Danielle, just kiddo. I told myself it didn't hurt. When Courtney wanted to go to equestrian camp in Colorado the summer she was 13, Gary wrote a check for $2,400 without blinking. When I asked, at 12, if I could attend a summer enrichment program at ASU that my biology teacher had personally recommended me for, Gary said they'd look into it. They never looked into it. The program cost $350. I found this out later. I never said anything. I told myself it didn't hurt. The pattern, once you see it, is impossible to unsee. And the maddening thing about patterns like this, the ones built from omission rather than action, from overlooking rather than cruelty, is that they are nearly impossible to name out loud without sounding paranoid. Because there's always an excuse. Gary had a work thing. They were going to look into it. These things happen. Stop being so sensitive, Danielle. And so I stopped being sensitive. I got very, very good at not being sensitive. I channeled everything. Every ignored birthday. Every blank look when I brought home straight A's. Every school event where Gary's eyes slid past me to find Courtney in the crowd. I channeled all of it into becoming quietly, ferociously excellent. I was the first in my family to apply to college on my own without being reminded. I got into the nursing program at the University of Arizona on a partial academic scholarship. I worked 22 hours a week at a Starbucks on Speedway Boulevard to cover the gap. I did not ask Gary for money. I did not ask for much of anything anymore. My mother, to her credit, was proud of me. She said so. She held my face in her hands the day I got my acceptance letter and cried, and I believed every single one of those tears. My mother's love was never the thing in question. It was always the division, the invisible ledger that kept my name on a different line than Courtney's, the subtle gravitational pull toward the golden child that my mother was too conflict-averse to push back against. And Courtney, I have to be fair, I have to be honest, Courtney wasn't always aware of what she was doing. She could be warm, funny, genuinely sweet in small moments, but she had been handed the center of every room for so long that she had confused it for her birthright. She didn't know how to make space for other people's accomplishments, because no one had ever required her to learn. This became more apparent as we got older. When I graduated nursing school with honors in 2015, Gary and my mother took us all to dinner. Courtney spent most of it talking about the marketing internship she had just landed in Phoenix. When I passed my NCLEX on the first try, a notoriously brutal exam that many people fail multiple times, my mother sent flowers to my apartment. Gary sent a text, one sentence, "Congrats, your mom is proud." Not "I am proud, your mom is proud." I kept that text for a long time. I'm not sure why. Some wounds you preserve. The years between nursing school and Courtney's wedding were the years in which I quietly became someone. I want to tell you about that. Not to brag, but because it matters to the story. It matters enormously. I started my nursing career at Banner University Medical Center in Phoenix, in the cardiovascular unit. I was good at the work. I was more than good. Within 3 years, I had cross-trained into the ICU, earned my CCRN certification. That's the Critical Care Registered Nurse Credential, one of the most rigorous certifications in nursing, and had begun teaching certification prep classes for other nurses on my days off. I developed a particular specialty in post-operative cardiac care that my attending physician, Dr. Marguerite Voss, said was the sharpest she'd seen in a nurse at my experience level. In 2020, during the pandemic, I worked 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. I intubated patients when doctors were stretched too thin. I held the hands of people dying alone because their families couldn't come. I made decisions in split seconds that kept human beings alive. I did this for weeks, then months. I lost 9 pounds. I developed a stress rash on my forearms that didn't fully clear up until 2021. I did not tell my family any of this. They did not ask. Courtney, during this same period, was building a lifestyle brand on Instagram. She had, I will admit, a genuine talent for visual aesthetics. Her account grew to about 40,000 followers. She became something in her world. I am not dismissing that. But I will tell you that during the worst weeks of the pandemic, when I was so tired I was eating dinner standing up in my kitchen at midnight, I would sometimes see her posts, beach content, brand partnerships, a reel about her skincare routine, and I would feel something I didn't have the language for yet. Not quite anger, not quite grief. It was the feeling of two lives existing in completely separate moral universes, still being asked to share a family. In early 2022, Courtney started dating a man named Blake Thorne. She brought him to the family Christmas that year, and I will be honest, Blake was lovely, genuinely lovely. Warm, attentive, the kind of person who asks follow-up questions and actually listens to the answers. He worked in commercial real estate and had a steady, calm quality that I thought was exactly what Courtney needed. At that Christmas dinner, Blake sat next to me for about 40 minutes while Courtney was on a call. Even at Christmas, there were always calls, and we talked about medicine. He had grown up in a family with a lot of doctors. His father, he mentioned, was a thoracic surgeon, retired now, had spent decades at the Mayo Clinic. He'd probably love to talk to you, Blake said. I smiled. I thought nothing of it. Now, if you've ever been the person in the room who everyone talks past, drop a candle in the comments. Let me know I'm not the only one who learned to make themselves smaller to survive in their own family. Courtney announced her engagement in March 2023 on Instagram before she told most of the family in person. I found out through a post. A reel, actually, with a trending audio and a shot of her ring catching the light. I found out my stepsister was engaged the same way 60,000 strangers found out. I called to congratulate her. She was warm. She was excited. And then she said, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and obviously you're invited. I mean your family. Obviously, I filed those words away. Planning for the wedding moved quickly. The venue was booked, the Grandview Estate, a stunning property in Scottsdale that rented for somewhere north of $15,000 for a Saturday evening, and Courtney began assembling her wedding party. 5 bridesmaids. Her 2 best friends from college, 2 friends from her influencer community, and her cousin on Gary's side, a girl named Britt, who I had met maybe 3 times at family reunions. I was not asked to be a bridesmaid. I want to be precise about what this felt like, because I've spent a lot of time with it. It wasn't the exclusion itself, exactly. Courtney had every right to choose her wedding party. It was the aftermath. It was the fact that when I called to RSVP, Courtney said in this light breezy tone, "Oh, we put you at table 11 with some of Gary's work friends. I figured you wouldn't know many people, so I put you with the fun people. Table 11. With people I'd never met. At my stepsister's wedding. After 15 years. My mother called me a week later, slightly awkward, and said, "I hope you understand, Danny. Courtney's been friends with those girls for years. It's not personal." "I know," I said. "She loves you." "I know," I said again. I told myself it didn't hurt. I bought a dress. A midnight blue Aiden Maddox that I found on sale for $180, and which looked, I can say without vanity, stunning on me. I booked a room at the Marriott 2 miles from the venue. I wrapped a gift, a KitchenAid stand mixer in matte white, that I knew Courtney had on her registry, which set me back $320. I drove to Scottsdale on a Friday evening in June, with an audiobook playing and a coffee from the Starbucks near my apartment, and I told myself this was going to be a good weekend. I told myself I was past all of it. I told myself I was a grown woman who had built something real and had nothing to prove. I almost believed it. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll give Courtney that. The vows were personal and specific. Blake cried, which made everyone cry, and the whole thing had the polished, golden quality of something that had been planned by a very expensive coordinator. Which it had. $42,000, I later learned. Gary paid for most of it. I sat in the 3rd row on the bride's side, next to Gary's younger brother, a man named Phil who smelled like bourbon and talked through the processional. I watched my stepsister walk down the aisle on Gary's arm, and she was radiant, genuinely radiant, and I felt, and this is the complicated truth, I felt proud of her. Proud and sad in equal measure. The way you feel about people you love imperfectly, across distance. At the reception, I found table 11 and introduced myself to Gary's work friends. They were fine people. We talked about nothing in particular over the salad course. The room smelled like gardenias and warm candle wax. The string quartet played something from Debussy that I recognized from a playlist I'd once made for a long night shift. And then came the toasts. Courtney's maid of honor went first, a 12-minute tribute that was equal parts funny and sincere. Then Blake's best man, who kept it to 4 minutes and got 2 genuine laughs. Then Gary stood up, and his toast made my mother cry and made me feel briefly the particular sorrow of watching someone receive the version of a father I had always wanted. Gary talked about Courtney's spirit, her warmth, her tenacity. He talked about watching her become a woman. He talked about the day she was born like it was the hinge of history. He did not mention me. He said, "Our family," twice. He did not say my name once. I was sitting 40 feet away. And then Courtney took the microphone for her own toast, and she thanked everyone with the particular grace of someone who has spent years performing warmth on camera and has become genuinely good at it. She thanked Gary. She thanked my mother, calling her the most elegant woman I know. She thanked her bridesmaids, each by name, with a specific anecdote. And then she looked toward my table, and I want to be exact about the look on her face, because it matters, it tells you everything. It was the look of someone who has just remembered a thing they keep forgetting to do, like renew a prescription or text back an acquaintance. Slightly warm, slightly distracted. "And my sister Danielle is here," she said. Her voice carried through the microphone, through the wisteria and the Edison bulbs, and the 200 people in their formal wear. "She's just a nurse, bless her heart, but we love her anyway." She smiled. She moved on to the next thing. The table laughed. The room moved on. And somewhere 3 tables away, in a charcoal Brioni suit, Dr. Richard Thorne went very still. If you've ever been reduced to a single sentence at a moment that should have celebrated you, type the word "scene" in the comments, because I need to know how many of us there are. I need to tell you who Dr. Richard Thorne is, because it changes the texture of everything that follows. Dr. Richard Thorne spent 31 years as a cardiothoracic surgeon at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. He operated on more than 4,000 patients in his career. He retired in 2019, at 64, after being diagnosed with Parkinson's, early stage, manageable but enough to make him put down the scalpel. He moved to Scottsdale to be closer to Blake and to enjoy the retirement he had earned. He was, by all accounts, a man with an extraordinary eye for competence and a deep, almost devotional respect for people who chose medicine as their life's work. I did not know any of this on the night of the wedding. What I knew was that a man in an expensive suit was looking at me with recognition across a room, and I had no idea why. After the toast, after Courtney moved on and the room reanimated, I sat very still for a moment. I took a sip of water. I reset my face. Gary's work friend, a man named Hal, started talking about golf. I nodded. I said in the right places. I was operating on autopilot. The same autopilot I had developed at 9 years old, at 11, at 15, every time this family had asked me to swallow something that should not have required swallowing. I excused myself after the first dance and walked toward the bar, which was set up along the east wall beneath an arbor of white roses. I ordered a club soda. I stood there for a moment just breathing, looking out at the dance floor, watching Blake spin Courtney under the lights. "Excuse me," a voice to my right. Measured, unhurried, the voice of someone who has spent decades speaking in high-stakes rooms and has learned to make every syllable count. "I'm sorry to intrude. My name is Richard Thorne. Blake is my son." I turned. The man from the charcoal suit. He was 68, maybe, with a surgeon's straight posture and eyes that were doing what I can only describe as a quiet assessment. Not rude, not clinical, but precise. Like he was reading something. "I know this is a strange thing to say," he said, "but I need to ask you. Are you Danielle Okafor? Did you do your residency training at Banner in Phoenix?" I stared at him. "I'm a nurse, not a physician. I don't do residencies. But yes, I trained and work at Banner." He nodded slowly. "Cardiovascular unit. ICU. Yes. 2020, he said. Spring. A patient was transferred from Banner to Mayo for a complex aortic repair. 61-year-old male. I was consulting on the case remotely during the early pandemic. I reviewed his pre-transfer chart. He paused. The nursing notes were some of the most precise, thorough documentation I had ever reviewed on a transferred patient. I called the charge nurse at Banner to ask who had written them. She told me your name. I said nothing. I was very still. I kept your name, he said. He looked almost embarrassed by the admission, in the way that rigorous people are embarrassed by sentiment. I wrote it on a notepad. I don't know why. I've thought about that chart documentation more times than I can account for. He tilted his head slightly. When Courtney introduced herself as your sister, last Christmas, I asked Blake about you. He didn't know much, but I recognized you from a photo on your hospital ID badge that was in the transfer file. He extended his hand. You are not just a nurse, he said. I want you to know that. In the movie version of this moment, I probably say something brilliant. In reality, I shook his hand, and I said thank you. And then my voice did something I hadn't authorized it to do. It cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. He pretended not to notice. Which is perhaps the kindest thing a person can do. We talked for 47 minutes. I know this because I checked my phone when we finally drifted back toward our respective tables, and it was 8:34, and the conversation had started at 7:47. In that time, Richard Thorne asked me about my work with a specificity and seriousness that I have rarely experienced in any context, let alone at a wedding reception. He asked about the CCRN. He asked about the teaching I was doing. He asked about post-operative hemodynamic monitoring in a way that was clearly testing whether I knew what I was talking about. I knew what I was talking about. At some point, he said, "Are you familiar with the Thorne Foundation?" I was not. He told me. The Thorne Foundation was a medical education nonprofit he had started after retiring, focused specifically on elevating the role of advanced practice nurses and critical care nurses in cardiac medicine, funding certifications, sponsoring research, creating fellowships for nurses pursuing specializations. It had been operating for 4 years and had to date funded 73 nurses across 9 states. We're launching a senior fellowship program in the fall, he said. A 2-year funded research and practice development track, working directly with our partner hospitals. There's a stipend, significant mentorship. The first cohort is 8 people. He looked at me very directly. I would like you to apply. I looked back at him. I thought about Table 11. I thought about Just a Nurse, bless her heart. I thought about the summer program at ASU that had cost $350. Yes, I said, I would like to apply. Now I need to tell you what happened when Courtney found out, because it didn't happen that night. It happened 6 weeks later, and it happened the way so many family revelations happen, in a group text that no one was prepared for. Blake, sweet man that he is, had apparently told Courtney about my conversation with his father at some point during their honeymoon. He had mentioned it as a good thing. Here's this amazing connection we made at the wedding. Look at this small world, and Courtney had filed it away. What she hadn't anticipated was that Richard would move quickly. Within 10 days of the wedding, I received a formal email from the Thorne Foundation with an application link, a detailed program overview, and a personal note from Richard at the bottom that said, "I hope the wedding was otherwise enjoyable. I look forward to seeing your application." I spent 2 weeks on that application. 40 pages of documentation, a 5,000-word personal statement, 3 letters of recommendation, including one from Dr. Marguerite Voss at Banner, who wrote, she later told me, for 2 hours straight because she had things she needed to say. I submitted it on a Thursday evening at 11:42 p.m., sitting at my kitchen table in my scrubs, eating cereal. 4 weeks later, I was selected. I was one of 8 nurses in the country selected for the inaugural cohort of the Thorne Foundation Senior Fellowship in Cardiac Nursing. There was a stipend of $40,000 per year. There was a research component in partnership with 3 major cardiac centers. There was my name, in the announcement that Richard sent to his networks, in the same sentence as words like exceptional and distinguished. I called my mother first. She cried. She said, "Danny, I am so proud of you I can hardly breathe." She said it twice. Then the group text happened. Blake had shared the Foundation's announcement post. Richard had tagged it on the Foundation's LinkedIn with a personal statement about the cohort, and someone in the family had found it. And suddenly there was a thread with 8 people in it, and a screenshot of the announcement, and a cascade of fire emojis and exclamation points. And then Courtney's message. Wait, my dad-in-law funded Danielle? When did this happen? Why didn't anyone tell me? I read it 3 times. Why didn't anyone tell me? Not congratulations, Danielle. Not this is incredible. The first instinct, even now, even here, was to make it about what she hadn't been told. My mother responded before I could. Courtney, this is wonderful news. Be happy for your sister. A long pause in the thread. Then, of course I'm happy. I just feel like I should have known. I put down my phone. I went to work. I did a 12-hour shift in the ICU, and somewhere in the middle of it I had a patient with a rhythm I didn't like the look of. And I stood over his bedside and ran the numbers and made the call, and the attending came in and agreed with me, and we moved quickly, and the man lived, and I drove home at 7 in the morning with the windows down and the Phoenix sunrise doing its thing over the mountains. And I thought, this is enough. This is enough. What I do is enough. I did not respond to the group text for 3 days. When I did, I wrote, thank you all. I'm really proud of this, looking forward to the work. 17 words. I am an expert at saying everything I need to say in exactly as many words as the situation requires. But the text thread was not the end of it. In the weeks that followed, I became aware that something was shifting in the family. A slow redistribution of gravity. The way tectonic plates move, incrementally and then suddenly. Gary called me. This was notable. Gary did not call me. I could count on one hand the number of times Gary had called me directly since I turned 18. He said, I hear you got some big news. That's great, kiddo. Kiddo. Still, I said, yes, I'm really grateful for the opportunity. He said, Richard's a good man, we like him. A pause. We've always known you were smart, Danny. And I thought. I held the phone and I breathed through my nose and I thought, where was this, Gary? Where was this at 9, at 11, at 15, at every school event you skipped, at the $350 program you never looked into? I said, thank you, Gary. I am very good at saying thank you in a tone that means something else entirely. Drop a number in the comments. How many of you have had to say thank you when you really meant something much more complicated? I feel like this is a universal language. Courtney called me in August, 2 months after the wedding. This was also notable. Courtney and I were not phone call people. We were the kind of family members who interact primarily at holidays and through the shared medium of the group text. A real phone call from Courtney on a Tuesday evening was an event. She opened warmly. She asked about the fellowship. She said the right things, that's so impressive, I'm really happy for you. And I let her say them, and I received them graciously because I was genuinely trying, to hold this relationship open like you hold a door in the wind. But then, I want to talk about the wedding, she said. I waited. I heard that my comment, the toast, landed kind of weird. Someone mentioned it to Blake, and I guess some people thought it was. She stopped. Was it weird? Did it bother you? I sat with this for a moment. The question felt like it wanted to be answered in a specific way. It wanted me to say, no, it was fine, I know you didn't mean it. The way I had always answered this kind of question, the way I had been answering this kind of question for 22 years. I said, Courtney, I'm 31 years old. I am a certified critical care nurse with a specialization in cardiac medicine. I saved a man's life last week. I mean that literally, not figuratively. What you said in front of 200 people reduced all of that to a punchline. Silence. I didn't mean it as a punchline, she said, smaller now. I know, I said. That's almost the harder part. More silence. The particular silence of someone encountering, possibly for the first time, the accumulated weight of something they've been too comfortable to notice. I'm sorry, she said. Finally, without qualification, without but. Just, I'm sorry. I want you to know that it cost her something to say that. I could hear it. Courtney had been the center of the story for so long that accountability was a foreign geography, and navigating it was genuinely effortful for her. I respected the effort. I know you are, I said. Do you forgive me? And here is where I had to be honest. Not cruel, not hard, but honest. I don't think forgiveness is a switch, I said. I think it's something that happens over time when things actually change. I'm open to that. I want to be open to that. Another pause. Then okay? Quietly. Okay. That's fair. We stayed on the phone for another 20 minutes, talking about nothing in particular. Her new apartment, my work schedule, a show we had both apparently watched. It was cautious and a little stilted, and also, for the first time in 15 years, something close to real. When I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment for a long time. I need to tell you about the night in November, 4 months after the wedding, because it is the moment the story became something I understood. The Thorn Foundation's inaugural fellowship cohort had our first in-person convening in Scottsdale, 3 days of lectures, case studies, collaborative work with foundation partners. Richard had organized it meticulously, as I was learning was his way. He ran things the way surgeons run things, precisely, purposefully, without wasted motion. On the last evening, there was a dinner at a private room in a restaurant called Lawns at the Hermosa Inn. The kind of place with adobe walls and mesquite-grilled everything, and a wine list that assumes you know things about Napa. The 8 fellows, Richard, and a handful of foundation board members. I sat 2 seats from Richard. Over dinner, he told a story, quietly, almost incidentally, about why he had started the foundation. He talked about a cardiac nurse he had worked with early in his career, in his residency days, whose clinical instincts had flagged an abnormality in a post-op patient that every physician had missed. The patient survived. The nurse never received formal recognition. She moved on. He never forgot her. Medicine has a hierarchy problem, he said to the table, but looking at his wine glass. Not everywhere. Not always. But often enough to matter. Often enough that extraordinary people get filed away under ordinary labels. He looked up. He looked at me for just a moment. I started this foundation because I got tired of waiting for the hierarchy to fix itself. I thought about just a nurse, bless her heart. I thought about it landing in a room with chandeliers and wisteria, at a table next to this man who had kept my name on a notepad for 3 years. I thought about the way the world works when you're not looking. The way the things you do in quiet rooms, in 12-hour shifts, in documentation that nobody celebrates, sometimes travel further than you know. I thought. You kept working. You kept working even when no one was watching, and someone was watching. That is not luck. That is not fate. That is compound interest on the discipline of excellence. Let me tell you where I am now, because the present matters as much as the past. It is March of 2026. I am 18 months into my fellowship. I am co-authoring a research paper on standardized nurse-led hemodynamic assessment protocols with a cardiologist at Cleveland Clinic. The paper will be submitted for peer review in April. If it's published, and Dr. Voss thinks it will be the first published work with my name on it. My name, in a medical journal. Not as a footnote, as a co-author. I still work at Banner 2 days a week. I need to, not financially. The fellowship stipend has given me more financial stability than I have ever had in my adult life, but because the floor is where I am real. The ICU is where I know what I am. I cannot write about hemodynamic assessment without still watching hemodynamics. The work and the research are the same thing to me. I don't know how to have one without the other. Richard and I have lunch every few weeks. He is one of the most intellectually rigorous people I have ever encountered, and our conversations are the kind that leave me driving home with 5 new things I need to look up. His wife Caroline is a former public health administrator with opinions about hospital policy that are sharper than most policymakers half her age. They have become, without ceremony or announcement, something like family to me, the chosen kind. The kind you arrive at through work and recognition rather than blood and paperwork. Courtney and I talk more than we used to. Not often, but more. She texted me in January when the fellowship was mentioned in an Arizona nursing journal. A short piece, 2 paragraphs, and she said, "I saw this. I'm proud of you. I mean it." I believed her. I wrote back, "Thank you. I mean it too." We are building something. It is slow and sometimes awkward, and occasionally I feel the old geometry of it pulling at us, the way old habits pull. But we are building. Gary sent me a card for my birthday in September. He wrote inside it in his own handwriting, "I know I haven't always gotten this right. I hope we can do better. It was not a full accounting. It was not redemption. It was a door left slightly open, and I have decided, for my own sake more than his, to leave it that way. My mother has dinner with me every other Sunday. We eat Nigerian food that she makes from scratch, and we watch old movies, and she tells me stories about her own mother, my grandmother, who died before I was old enough to know her properly. These Sunday evenings are among the most important hours of my week. They remind me that love doesn't always come from where you hoped it would, but it does come. I want to say something directly to you now. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever time it is where you're sitting. If you have ever been the person at table 11, if you have ever been the afterthought, the footnote, the one whose accomplishments were received with polite indifference while someone else's were met with standing ovations, I want you to hear this. The work was never wasted. Not the late nights. Not the unglamorous shifts. Not the documentation no one praised. Not the exam you passed alone. Not the certification you earned without a celebration. Not 1 hour of it was wasted, because it was accumulating in a ledger that the world keeps separate from the one your family keeps. And at some unexpected moment, at a wedding reception, in a random conversation, in a 2-paragraph journal mention, in a notepad someone kept for 3 years for a reason they couldn't explain, it will show up. The receipts will arrive, maybe not loudly, maybe not in a way anyone writes a movie about, but they will arrive. This isn't revenge. I need to be clear about that. I did not want Richard Thorne to hear Courtney's toast and decide she was a bad person. I did not want Gary to feel guilty for the rest of his life. I did not want anyone humiliated in a way that mirrored what had been done to me. That is not the point. That has never been the point. The point is architecture. The point is that I built something. Quietly, consistently, over 15 years, in the margins of a family dynamic that was not designed to support me, in a profession that the world is only beginning to understand properly. I built something of enduring value. And when the moment came, the building stood. It stood in front of 200 people and an empty microphone and a man in a charcoal suit who had been looking for me without knowing it. You cannot bless her heart your way past a woman who has already built her own foundation. Some of you watching this have been told you're just something. Just a teacher, just an assistant, just a mother, just a technician, just a student. And I want you to sit with this. The word just has never once been used by someone who understands value. It is only ever used by someone trying to manage their own discomfort with yours. It says nothing true about you. It says everything about them. Build anyway, document everything. Do the work in the quiet rooms. And if someone keeps a notepad with your name on it for 3 years, it means the quiet rooms had windows. Before I go, I want to ask you something. In the comments below, tell me what's the thing you do that people in your life don't fully understand or appreciate. What's your just a nurse moment? Because I genuinely believe that the most important work in the world is being done by people who have been told they're just doing it. I want to hear about you. And if this story moved you, if any part of it landed somewhere real, please subscribe. Not for the algorithm, not for the numbers, subscribe because it means you want to come back, and I would like you to come back. I have more stories. I have a story about the research paper I mentioned, about what happened in the weeks before submission, that I think you will want to hear. That one's in the description below, go watch it. I'll be there. Thank you for being wherever you are. Thank you for the time you gave this story. Take care of yourselves and of the people who actually see you. I'll see you next time.